Well, hello everyone. This is Manisha Khadke, your host for DI podcast, and today we have a very cool female entrepreneur from the healthcare industry, Lisa Marceau, and she is the CEO and co-founder of uh, Millennial Health and Joyuus LLC. Welcome, Lisa. And Before I kind of dive into a deeper discussion, I would love you to briefly introduce, talk about your background story, and share some information around what makes Lisa Lisa.
Well, thank you so much. And it's really great to be on this podcast and to be talking with you. I think that now kind of is no better time to be discussing some of the issues around women's health and around the founder's journey. Just briefly, my background has been in clinical research my entire career. I spent 30 years doing primary research, working on projects really that were addressing the gold standard in clinical research. And at the same time, we were also doing research on healthcare disparities. So understanding where disparities come from in the system, but also doing clinical best practice, for example. And so during that journey, I started a business unit called the Digital Research Strategies Business Unit to really build products and programs and interventions that addressed this gap between best practice and real world. Because as we know, when people can't do best practice, often they do nothing, or they cut pills in half, or they become kind of victims of a system that they can't access resources. So in my work, we spent a lot of time building interventions that were evidence-based, but perhaps didn't go so far as to achieve best practice. I did that work until our company, which was a small business, was acquired. And I worked in the healthcare industry, the payer industry for a few years, really understanding how the system worked from the inside and from the outside. That was the catalyst for me starting both Alpha Millennial Health, which I founded in 2021, and also Joyuus, which is a startup focused on postpartum health, self-care. And I can dive into the details of both of those, but the reason that I started them was really to make impactful change for women, for female founders, for underrepresented founders, because we are addressing a major gap in women's healthcare. We are addressing critical issues that have not been researched, and that is kind of the work that I'm going to do for the rest of my career.
Sounds great. It seems like your research background certainly plays critical role in what you're doing today, getting deeper understanding of the challenges, etc. So before we talk about very female specific challenges within the healthcare ecosystem, and it's always inspiring to see women entrepreneur because they're accountable, so their stories are always inspiring. Tell us a little bit about your family background. What made you opt for research? What's the Lisa's background story in terms of choosing these field and then eventually, take a entrepreneur jump?
That is a great question. And it's really interesting because I have 3 children, 21 and 2 18-year-olds. And I spend a lot of time talking to and with the digital generations. So those under 40 who are really finding their way. And so your question is a great one, because my answer is I didn't have a plan. I mean, it really was, my journey is a squiggly line. It is connecting dots. And I think that's really important for the world that our kids are growing up in today to understand, but also as we kind of take these next journeys in our lives as leaders, to realize that we don't have to have a clearly defined path. That's different than saying I didn't have passion, or I didn't have direction, or I didn't do things on a pathway. It just means that because I didn't have this clear A to Z line, I did a lot of things which contributed to where I am today. And I think, part of my journey was that's how I was raised as well, to work hard, but to also be open-minded to the fact that it doesn't always work out the way you planned. And the other thing is to always look around you and see who in your life may have it, worse off than you, or may have different challenges than you, and just see the world from the perspective that might not be your perspective. And so all of those things really contributed to the place that I am today. But it was no one specific thing. I did a number of jobs, and I did a number of different types of projects, and each one contributed something to my understanding, to my learning, to my expertise that make me able to do what I am today. And that's really exciting to me. And I encourage our younger generations to remember that they don't have to have it figured out today, because it's going to change 100 million times. And if this week isn't an example of that, I don't know what is.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, different people have different process. Some people plan it out very meticulously, and some people grab every opportunity which comes on their way and, make out a big success out of it. I guess both processes are fine as long as it suits the person. So, as you rightly said. All right. So, I understand that you might have seen a lot of gaps in women's healthcare. You might have encountered few yourself. There could be a lot of which you might have heard from the women colleagues and your peers, etc. But if you have to narrow down and probably highlight top three most significant gaps in women's healthcare, for the audience, that will be really helpful, along with how is your current two ventures are aiming to address these issues.
Thank you. I think those are really important questions. And I think, the obvious, I mean, we all as women, I think, can resonate with the experience of walking into a room and being the only female executive, female leader, female blank, fill in the blank. So what I focus on is really, to your point, kind of the three major gaps and solutions that I think are needed in order to move this industry forward. And number one is the data side, the data gaps. This is well published now. I think it's talked about a lot, but I think it's really important to keep in mind that data gaps are not only the gaps where data was just not collected on women for decades. In the United States, it was from the 1970s. We were actually excluded from data. And then in the 90s, when women were required to be included in research, for example, we are still not included at the levels that we are in the population. So we might be 30% of a research participant panel. We are 50% of the population. So these gaps are in data collection. We are still missing women in how we collect data. But I think the second thing to understand about that is that when we have a data gap that is this large and this long, we are talking about data equity as well. And this isn't the same as data equality. It's not about having 50% of the data being female data today. It's about the fact that all of the data that has supported diagnoses and treatments and decisions across the board that affect all of our lives, not just our health, but a lot of it affects our health, is that the precursor data is inequitable. It's focused on a larger male sample, which means that it's different body types, body physiology, and all of the things that make it harder to understand how it is affecting the female gender, right? So what's really important is the data gap is missing data, but also equity within the data. The other thing that I think is really important is that one of the biggest challenges is that we have to make sure that the data being created, the research being done, is generated by people who have lived experiences. And that's not, again, and I'm a real advocate to say this isn't a women's only club. I have a number of tremendous colleagues across the spectrum of demographics, and are all very, very important to the work we do. But I think that lived experience matters, right? We understand what menopause is. We understand what infertility is. We understand what it's like to go through cardiovascular disease when you don't have the traditional male symptoms. So it's really, really important to understand that we can't study diseases that affect our gender unless it is us who are studying them. And then the third is really avoiding silos. And I think we have a unique opportunity to bring together And in the founder's journey, in the entrepreneurial space, I think this is so critical, and there's such collaboration and opportunity. Founders in the women's space collaborate because we're natural collaborators. And I think that we see the value of bringing together our work rather than trying to compete with each other. And I think this is the opportunity that we have to continue to grab onto, because this is where we're going to make change and we're continue to drive change forward.
Sounds great. And I guess when you started answering the question, you said that it's only 30% is a significant percent as far as the woman representation is concerned. But if you see healthcare as an industry, 76% of women workforce in healthcare, is the kind of huge representation which is there, including nursing, administrative roles, but still, it is, I would say, underrepresented when it comes to the leadership position where, you could make that difference. So right, because I remember, coming to the health event for the first time. And prior to that, I've worked with other verticals and industries like travel and BFSI domain, and health event was the first event where I could see so many women. And that's when I kind of dig deeper and saw that in terms of percentage of workforce, there's a huge percentage of women who work, but there are very few in leadership, and there are very few people who are actually addressing women health. And as you rightly pointed, the data probably is the biggest challenge which you're trying to solve. That's amazing and excellent. So as a female entrepreneur in the health tech space, is there any specific or unique challenge you faced in terms of starting your own business? It could be as small as getting the right people. It could be, you're struggling with funding, or anything in a what you call male dominated space where it's tough for a woman entrepreneur to run her business. Anything which comes to your mind, or maybe a good experience, because at times there are men who also kind of support men. So that's another area. Yeah, so if you could talk a little bit more about that.
I think it's an important point, because I think we've all experienced it, and I think it's really, well, kind of, I guess, universal in some ways to feel like you are the only woman in a room, or that you're talked over or dismissed in some way. And that I think is something that we've all felt, and a challenge that we've all experienced. I think one of the biggest in the women's health space that I found recently, and I think there's two sides of that coin. One is the experience that I had, but also, to your point, the allyship and the collaboration that I have felt in this space as well. And the example is when I was on in a group, we were in a group doing a conversation around kind of this emerging market and how we were going to attack it. And it was a mixed group. It was a number of women and a couple of people supporting that effort. And I think what struck me is there were 3 women talking about the biggest challenges in women's healthcare and how we could approach and attack this market together collaboratively to bring it to the forefront, to bring these ideas into bigger concepts and bigger products. And at the end of the meeting was summarized by the person who was leading it. And he said, well, what I'm hearing is the 3 biggest things we need to focus on are, and he named 3 challenges in women's healthcare that are listed in Google, basically, and they're not unimportant, right? Cardiovascular disease, breast cancer,
Right.
I mean, things that we really need to focus on. But what he missed, and I think this is where listening and collaboration becomes really important, is that those things are already being studied. We're not looking at immune disorders, for example, at nearly the right pace. We're not looking at things like, we're starting to understand ovarian cancer is diagnosed, for example, at stage 3 and 4, where prostate cancer is being diagnosed pre-cancer. So
Right.
the fact that these are the things that have been missed in our research and missed in our product development, that's why lived experience matters, right? So when I say one of the biggest challenges that I've faced as a female founder, it's it's being given the space and then having that space redefined, even when we're saying, no, these are the things we need to discuss. And the flip side of that coin is that I just want to acknowledge all of the wonderful people that I have worked with across the board who have supported us, who have supported me, who see this challenge as something that we solve together. And Joyuus is really grateful and thrilled to be, for example, one of the founding small businesses that has been supported by HPE's diversity program, their Foundry program. And that is a range of expertise and talent, men, women, diverse backgrounds, diverse expertise. And to me, that's what this is about. It's about collaboration. It's about bringing teams together. It's about sharing our expertise and hearing each other, really, is what it really boils down to.
That's, yeah, of course. It's always a teamwork. So collaboration is key to, succeeding in any area, not just this. All right. So you spoke a little bit about the data side of it and how important it is, and plays a critical role in terms of understanding and then, of course, eventually providing the solution. But overall, in terms of technology, how do you feel the technology play a role in terms of bridging the gap? That's one question. And then the second one is more around the AI, because everyone is now talking about AI. And I guess healthcare in particularly, has a mixed feeling. Some people are a little conscious because it's highly compliance and regulation driven. So, you don't want to kind of end up being a mess, and, there are high penalties and whatnot as far as the patient data is concerned, because privacy and regulations are certainly important. So if you could talk about two things. One is, of course, technology as a larger role, and then specifically around AI, and if there's anything you are doing at both your initiatives with AIs, that'll be, I think, a great learning for the listeners.
Fantastic. And so taking the first question first, technology in healthcare, taking the technology in our world, I think one of the things that I talk about it a lot, and I'm actually writing a book on the role of the digital generations and how their basically adoption of technology from birth is shifting the paradigm in our healthcare system. That message is really, really clear. I think the pandemic made it even clearer that the technology is already here. Technology really underpins everything we do. And so when I started in my career, when we used technology, it was like we created a VHS or a DVD. And as things move, technology became this add-on feature to things, and it was kind of exciting and new. But I think we can't open a refrigerator or drive a car or essentially do anything today without technology. So technology is just part of our fabric of our society, right? It's critical to healthcare. And I think the fact that we kind of still talk about technology in healthcare, I think is interesting, because it is such part, it's already woven into so many things. Like we couldn't conduct health without it in many ways. So I think that that's really important. Where it's going and the evolution of technology in health and digital tech is how we're going to make it better, how we're going to use it more efficiently. I think one of the challenges, kind of going back to what you asked earlier, in the health space right now is that we have so many digital solutions, right? And they are almost competing with each other because digital solutions are so ubiquitous. So the question is, how do we make sure that they are working together? How do we make sure that the technologies are integrating? I think that's a greenfield right now. It's a huge space on integrating data, bringing data systems and data sets together in ways that create value. So in technology as a whole, I think it's going to be about how do we integrate our data to create a more holistic picture. Security is obviously going to be increasingly significant. And I think I don't have the data at my fingertips, but one of the things I was reading is that cybersecurity and data security are going to become one of the most important and expensive parts of our future growth. And that makes sense, right? The more data we have, the more we need to protect it. So in terms of technology, I think it's universal. I think it's here. And I think it's really about how are we going to make it more effective as we look at it in the future. When we talk about AI, I think we're on that. It seems like we're on the cutting edge or the bleeding edge of AI, but I think it helps to remember that AI in its earliest forms has been around for 2 decades. Again, AI is not in itself a new technology. Right. The rapid expansion of AI is that fact that we have now handed it over to the general population. It used to be something that you had to hire people to do, large language models. You had to have scientists in a back room who could access those data. Data is everywhere, and it's becoming more and more accessible. And AI generation has now become something that anyone with a computer can figure out how to use. So your question is, what is, if I'm summarizing it correctly, is like, what is the impact of AI going forward? And I think, again, what we need to focus on, and I talk about this a lot with the work I do in digital generations, is we're not putting this genie back in the bottle. AI isn't going away. It has been here for 2 decades. It's only getting more and more pervasive. So again, what do we do with it that brings equity to our data? We have opportunities with AI to actually make equitable data, to really answer questions faster, because we can bring more data together and see where the gaps are. We can actually see finer focuses on gaps in health when we start to bring a variety of cardiovascular data and menopause data and infertility data. If we look at all of this and we map it, and we start to use AI to figure out where the gaps are, we can actually be more instructive about where we need to focus our research. So I think AI has a lot of opportunity. Joyuus in and of itself is actually part of our roadmap right now, and part of our work with our collaborators is, in fact, to look at the data that we bring to the table through our product, the data that exists in the world, and the data that we can partner with to start answering some of these big questions in women's health, in the reproductive health space, to start to pinpoint where we need to start solving problems. And we're looking at, I think, one really unique thing about our program and platform is we're not just looking at clinical data. We're looking at we're looking at mental health data. We're looking at social data, socioeconomics. We're looking at kind of real world social determinants of health, where you live, your geography, things like that. So there are real opportunities, I think, with AI to accelerate what we're learning, and that's kind of where we are positioned to continue to grow.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think your take on AI kind of explains the whole story, and as you rightly said, that it's been a buzzword for long, but earlier it's like what classes versus masses. Now it has a mass approach, so it's no longer accessible to only the genius people. Anyone can use AI. So I think very well summarized. If I want to dig deeper and talk a little bit more about your initiatives, help us understand who's your target audience and what precise problem you're trying to solve in terms of women health. And since you said that when you talk about data, it is not just the clinical data, or it is lot of data sets. So and then on top of it, that there is a challenge that there is less data as far as women is concerned. So how are you kind of dealing it with maybe people who are watching this and want to start an entrepreneur journey, if they could learn something out of your story? So if you could throw some light in terms of what precise problem you're looking to solve and what your target audience is, and how do you solve the data challenge in terms of specifically acquisition of data, of course.
Great questions. And so I'll answer that in 2 ways. One is on the Alpha Millennial business. What I do is I support all founders who are looking for business strategy around how to get off the ground, how to start a company. I work a lot with female founders and underrepresented founders, precisely because they have never been in the room. They're not on the golf course. They haven't grown up in this space of like, how do you start a business? So I spend a lot of time with with founders, talking about the founder's journey. So how do you take concept and move it through these stages to entrepreneurship with confidence, within a safe space that feels comfortable, where you can ask all the questions that you want to ask. So in my Alpha Millennial work, it's really to support founders on that business strategy journey. And I focus on three things, really. One is building your organizational structure, because the fundamentals of any business is not putting people in seats until you know what seats you actually need. So build your structure. And the second one is building a company infrastructure. So what is your overall objective and plan for your company? You know your product really well, you have your concept down, but how do you, what pieces of a company do you need in order to support that? And then the third piece is financial stewardship. So helping entrepreneurs understand that even if you got investment, or if you got non-dilutive funding through the SBIR program, which I do a lot of work in, how do you frame those funding decisions so that you're making the best of those of that funding, with stewardship, with understanding of how to make it stretch the longest, how to find additional resources. So in Alpha Millennial, I spend a lot of my time on supporting the founder in that journey, because they're the ones who are bringing all this innovation to light. They're the ones driving change. So that's in that space, that's where I help drive technology and AI and all of those products forward. On the Joyuus side, it's a little different. I'm the founder, and I'm the one building the company with these tools. And so where I'm, spending a lot of my time is collaborating with groups like HPE. I have an amazing CTO. She's tremendous and brings a lot of expertise and resources with her. We're partnering with experts and groups who have built data sets and data lakes, really, to connect with large publicly available data sets. So our journey is really, how do you take the hypothesis, the question for us, data equity? How do you solve some of the major issues in where we're starting is postpartum health, right? And what we're trying to do is say, if we know all of the data sources, ours and those that we're partnering with, and we know what our hypothesis is, and to your point, some of the change we're starting with is, how do we actually impact change to get to prevention earlier for moms dealing with some of the biggest challenges in postpartum health: depression, hemorrhage, cardiovascular, preeclampsia, to anything like anemia, things that are challenging moms across the spectrum. How do we get moms to be aware of it earlier? Because a lot of times they're just not aware. We're told we're tired. We're told we don't, it's hormonal changes. We're sent home when we go seek care. We want to give moms the tools very specifically to say, this is what we're seeing in your data, and here's what that means in terms of a risk factor for a potential condition. And here's what you need to do. And here's how you seek care with a, virtual or in person, with a group that can actually help address those symptoms earlier, so we can get to prevention faster, we can get to treatment faster, and keep moms out of the hospital. So that's really what Joyuus's objectives are. And we're doing that through collaborating across a number of teams with data opportunities to look at, again, not just the clinical and mental health data, which we collect, but with geographic data, with health systems data, and also with our own analytics. How are moms moving through our app to use the apps and the tools and the information, so that we can see what might be connected with your challenges in maybe housing, or your challenges in returning to work, with depression and anxiety, or with cardiovascular disease. These are the things that we'll be able to look at more holistically. You're muted.
Yeah, that's actually great. I think there's probably very few companies who are looking into these issues. There's at times women don't even talk about those issues, but they face these issues for sure. So are there any surprising data sets or findings which you probably have discovered over a period of time? I understand that Joyuus is new venture, but that is kind of encouraging you to, maybe do it with the faster pace, and you can see the early impact of those data sets in terms of, helping specifically females with this particular findings. So is there anything you want to share which might have surprised you in terms of some facts and which you might have discovered over whatever short journey you've had so far with Joyuus?
I think that in terms of data sets and data, the access to data, I think that, the biggest I think awareness is something that we're all becoming more and more aware of, is just the availability of data. There's a ton of passion in this space. So I think that there's a lot of collaboration, which is fantastic. And I think what we're all doing is finding ways to kind of unearth those data and find ways to make sure that we are making them integratable, bringing them together. So there's a lot of that going on, which I think is really exciting. The other thing that I spend a minute on, which I think has become really critical to this story, both for Alpha Millennial Health, for Joyuus, and for the entire women's health market, is just awareness around the data of what this means. And a lot of people, early on were, are you nonprofit? How talking about women's health is nonprofit? I don't understand. But then the conversation really evolved to, well, women's health, that's this niche area over here, which when you're 50% of the population is not at all niche. But what is really important, I think, is that supporting women's health and supporting these opportunities to bring all these data together and to solve these really, really critical health problems. These aren't lifestyle issues. These are fundamental things that are killing women early, that are causing disability and illness for years of their lives. The things that we need to keep in mind is that women, this is an economic issue. Women are 40% of breadwinners in the United States. They are 50% of the workforce. And to your point, there's 70+% of the healthcare workforce. They make 80% of the purchasing decisions. We make 80% of the purchasing decisions. And if we solve just the very top conditions in women's health, if we bring those diagnoses earlier in prevention, treatment earlier in treatment, it's a $14 billion economic return. It's a $20 billion women's health market. And I think that these numbers are really important to understand, because if we close this health gender gap, it's not just about doing something for women. It's about $1 trillion impact on GDP. So we have to stop thinking about women's health as something that is nice to do, but that's something that we have to do economically, because we actually have to change the value of keeping women in the workforce, keeping women in that we provide 80% of unpaid care for older adults. So when we're sidelined, permanently or temporarily, we change the economic impact across a number of areas. And that's why I think this is such important work to do.
Absolutely. I think that's a great, maybe more like a concluding comment, is because we started with passion, but it is just not passion. It makes a lot of business sense because there are financials involved and it has such a huge economic impact. So we are talking real business here. And at the same time, through passion, addressing the real problem, which really makes women's health better. Great. I'm sure that people will kind of learn a lot from this particular podcast. And I certainly wanted to kind of say thank you for joining us. Before we say goodbye to everyone, is there any message you would like to, give to the audience who will listen to you and watch you and probably want to be Lisa, and start the entrepreneur journey just like yours?
I think that what I would say to anyone out there, and anyone who is interested in jumping off this ledge into entrepreneurship, and particularly women and female underrepresented founders, people who haven't really thought that they could, I would say there's a lot of fear in thinking that you can start your own business or start into this adventure. And I would say that fear and change and innovation are very interconnected. So fear is based on discomfort, and discomfort is a result of change. And innovation can only happen when there is change. So I would say, let's move through fear to innovation through collaboration.
Wow, I think that's a perfect concluding statement. Thank you so much, Lisa. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.